Hi, everyone. Welcome to Food Talk Live. I'm your host, Danielle Nierenberg. This week, we're celebrating the lead up to Earth Day on Thursday, April 22nd, with a series of discussions with chefs from around the world to talk about the importance of culturally appropriate diets that are good for people and the planet, and that respect generations of knowledge by farmers, cooks, and communities. These discussions will build on the recently released One Health approach to food, the double pyramid connecting food, culture, health, and climate from the Barilla Center for Food and Nutrition. And what is exciting to me is that the health and climate pyramids really appreciate and honor the richness of culinary and dietary traditions and diversity across the globe. The Barilla Center for Food and Nutrition has also created 7 cultural pyramids that focus on different regions of the world, highlighting the incredible diversity of what sustainable and healthy foods can look like. And it's time to recognize how farmers, indigenous peoples, elders, and cooks of all ages and cultures have been producing healthy and sustainable diets for hundreds of generations. Diets that are nutrient dense, plant forward, and delicious. I just want to remind everyone that this episode will also be on our podcast, Food Talk with Danielle Nierenberg. And we hope you'll use the hashtag double pyramid to continue the conversation that we started last week with the launch of the health and climate pyramids. Today, we'll be highlighting chefs from South and East Asia. And it's my pleasure to introduce Chef Manjit Gill, who is a former corporate chef and slow food advocate, credited with positioning India as a world food destination. Chef Gill serves as the president of the Indian Federation of Culinary Associations. He was the first Indian chef granted an honorary life membership by the World Association of Chef Society or World Chefs. And he also serves as the chair of the organization's Culinary, Culture, and Heritage Committee. And next we have Chef Peggy Chan, who is a well-known advocate for sustainably sourced plant-based foods in Hong Kong. Her first restaurant was recognized by the United Nations for its sustainability leadership. And she works to help food service professionals transition to healthier, eco-friendly practices through her consulting firm, Grassroots initiatives. Welcome to you both. It's really such a pleasure to have you. So I want to jump right in and start this amazing conversation. And I'm wondering for you both, what inspired you to really advocate for culturally appropriate, plant-forward, really delicious diets? And maybe Chef Gill, you can go first.
Want me to start?
Yes, please go ahead, Chef Gill.
Yeah. You see, when I became a chef, started working professionally in the hotel, and then slowly I found and I started taking a lot of interest in the Indian gastronomy, the Ayurveda you might have heard, and I come across a lot of information which is recorded, thousands of years back in the Ayurveda, and that inspired me a lot to understand the food. What is food? Because then I realized that cooking is only the finale, is the final stage of the knowledge and the skills you have. That's the cooking. We must understand the food above the cooking, what it is overall, and then understood the food from where it comes, how it comes, and then, what is in the whole food chain, where is wrong, what is wrong, and all that. There are many things to, highlight it and come and see that. And then the first thing which learned from our Indian gastronomic science of the Ayurveda, that makes the whole thinking different when I come to know that the food is not a commodity. It's an auspicious thing which is given by the Almighty to nurture us, and we get nurtured only from the food. And then, it's so beautifully everything, it, starts from the 5 elements of the universe, and the food and the physiology, our body is also all up with the 5 elements. There is nothing in this world exists in the universe which has the 5 elements. It's our biological body or this animal and the food we eat. So that is the link with this, with the universe, that we are part of the nature. We are also nature. We are part of the nature. So, understanding with all these things, and then, when you read more and more into this, everything, down on the 5 elements of the universe, your body, and then the food, and then the taste of the food, every taste, like India talks about, and they have a complete science on 6 tastes. And these 6 tastes are of the natural flora and fauna, not after cooking. These are the natural tastes of the flora and fauna, and every taste is a composition of 2 elements of the nature. So I'm saying, is these 2 elements, the taste, and then these tastes, also 6 tastes, goes up and down in the like the body required them with the season. And the best compatibility happen when the produce of the season, because you are also part of the nature of that season, is the compatibility is much closer and easy. It happens, and digestibility and the whole process become much better. So understanding all these things, it makes me, force or makes me to understand the cookery or the food as a science, and then above the cookery, it is all that started. And this is how, get more and more into that, start practicing that, and then, much more closer to the farmers. I'm not, my father was in the service, but otherwise family of the farmers. We have the land, we people, but not live in the village, but family is of the farmers. Then get more closer to the farmers.
Oh, we've lost your sound, Chef Gill. So I'm going to turn to Peggy now, and hopefully we can get your sound back. So Chef Chan, again, it's great to have you here. I love what Chef Gill had to say about seasonality and the importance of recognizing farmers and, the natural taste of things. There, you're back. That's great. But Chef Chan, I'm wondering what your thoughts are and about, what has inspired you to take on these issues in such a creative way and work with so many other sustainable food advocates.
So really great to be here tonight, and to also hear from
Chef Gill, could you go on mute for a moment? I'm sorry, we're getting some feedback.
Yeah.
Chef Gill, please go on mute. I'm so sorry.
That's cool.
Go ahead, Chef Gill.
So yeah, how I got started into sustainable agriculture and understanding how our work as chefs is interrelated with what the farmers do, and how we can actually change human consumption through our decisions as chefs. I actually started to become vegetarian or meat-free when I was younger. So in Hong Kong, there is quite a bit of a Buddhist culture here. And I think, religion is rooted in a lot of our Southeast Asian and Asian diets, Asian heritage, and even in India as well, where certain types of food are refrained from. And so in my own home, we avoided beef, and also twice a month we would become vegetarian. So that was just kind of like a part of my upbringing. But for me, it was more so about the animal welfare issues. So as a teenager, seeing that animals are being slaughtered, and I didn't understand why we needed to do that to obtain food, was where it really sparked. But only when the World Wide Web became more convenient for people to do some research was when I realized that there is actually much more to our food system that is not being taught. So I went to culinary school as well as hotel school, but it was never taught to me where food comes from, like what Chef Gill earlier said. And it was through an article that I read in 2015 on Gourmet magazine that mentioned something about GMOs and how farmers are committing suicide because of the situation that they're faced with, where they don't have the choice anymore to actually be able to grow, to save their seeds and to also reharvest it the next season. And that kind of injustice really shook me. And that's when I realized that the entire food system is so incredibly broken, and people on the bottom are generally not being heard. And that's how I kind of molded my culinary experience with my entrepreneurialism, as well as my advocacy towards helping the little people and the animals who don't have a voice generally, to use my platform at Grassroots Pantry to raise awareness. And Dr. Vandana Shiva is I think one of the best teachers around this, and she's one of the kind of teachers that I've always looked up to in terms of learning more about equity and food justice in our food system.
I love that you mentioned Dr. Shiva, and it goes back to what Chef Gill said earlier about food is not a commodity. Food is a human right. And the more we can respect that and appreciate the food cultures that have been so important in creating sustainable food systems. And as you said, Peggy, really listening to people, amplifying the voices of those that are not often heard. That is such an important part of this conversation. I'm wondering what you both think are some of the biggest misconceptions about eating culturally appropriate, sustainable diets. I think a lot of people think they have to give up something to eat in a way that is both culturally appropriate and good for people and the planet. I don't know which of you wants to go first. Please just jump in. Chef Gill, go ahead. You're on mute. Go ahead.
Yeah, asking for the culinary, that how we incorporated all these things into the culinary. Yes, then you work on the menus and accordingly, and what all is seasonal and what is available and what's the fresh from the farm. You can get it, and you are in touch with the farm always. You know what's happening at the farms and in the market. Then accordingly, you get the things, and then you cook, and a variety of things, you cook with that. And I am more from the traditional Indian food, so I cook my food. I love to cook my food, and I give more emphasis on the vegetarian food, because I'm being a vegetarian since birth. I only taste the meats and the fish and all that as my job demands to taste it, but I never use as my meals. So my emphasis were always on the plant-based food, and accompanied with the meats. But my always in the menus, you'll find the highlighted dishes are more vegetarian, which I love to cook and to serve also.
If I can interject, a lot of people think that if they eat plant forward or vegetarian, that they have to give up so much. And I'm wondering how you can dispel that misconception. That's a myth, right? You're not giving up a lot when you're eating more plant forward or plant-based diets and eating less meat.
No, I was vegetarian by choice. It's not any taboo or there's nothing. So it's the person like me will taste the meats also. There's no issue in that.
So I think that's the point, that there's a lot of flavor and a lot of goodness that comes out of eating plant-based diets. You're not necessarily giving anything up. You're gaining a lot.
Absolutely. Using the plant-based food, even the cookery is more difficult, because every vegetable, according to the season, they have a different texture, they have a different color, they have a different, flavor, the different taste. Everything is different. It's not all vegetables cook in the same way. They all cooked in a different way, and to get the best out of them, you have to be careful. Particularly even the spicing. Spicing in India, like we use a lot of spices, but spicing is more difficult in the vegetables than in the meats. And it's one have to be more careful. You have to be much more compatible to the taste and the flavor of the vegetable, and your spicing has to be that which are the flavors has to be put spicing, and which taste to be matched with that is a little more complicated than doing the meat. So the plant-based food is very, very tasty. And on top of that, we never felt sort of protein in the plant-based food, because we use a lot of lentils, and we eat a lot of lentils. We have variety of lentils. Then within each lentil, we have different kinds. We have created variety in that. Like we have the whole lentil, then we have the split but with the skin, then we have the split without the skin. So all three have different. All three have different tastes now.
Absolutely, very
all
diverse.
three have a different cooking temperature. Cooking time is also all three have different. And all three are different as for the body metabolism also easy to digest. The thing, but they are like with skin, they are high in fiber, without skin, they are less in fiber, but protein is there. So and we cook the lentils absolutely to the well cooked stage. They're almost mushy.
Right.
That's so that the protein of the lentils is easy to digest.
Great.
So we know that art. So we really enjoy cooking them and serving them, and the variety is great. So much of variety.
Absolutely. So, Chef Tan, I'm wondering if you can describe some of the misconceptions about eating in this way that's more sustainable that you've heard from people. I mean, Chef Gill has alluded to, that there's so much complexity that goes into cooking plant-forward diets. But, you also want to make this easy for folks to understand and for eaters to be able to cook this at home and also enjoy it at restaurants. What are some of the biggest misconceptions you've heard?
Well, one of the things with cultural appropriation is that we have to truly understand the background behind every single culture, as well as their economic level and productivity level. Because when we're talking about Hong Kong as a city, we can't simply shift people's mindsets just by giving them delicious food. Yes, of course, tasty food is important. Tasty vegetarian food is important, but there's a systemic issue involved as well. And in Hong Kong, with one of the highest amount of restaurants per capita in the world, as well as the top 3 meat consumers in the world, there's obvious systemic issue that needs to occur, which is we have to first and foremost encourage that suppliers incorporate more transparency in their supply chain. So where is this meat coming from? Why is it so cheap? Why is that every single person can afford cheap meat more so than clean vegetables? Like, we need some form of transparency there in order for people to make higher level choices. And then at the same time, we need to be educating people in how do we cook vegetables in a tasty way and a more innovative way. Most culinary schools don't dedicate this to the students. So if you don't give time into something, then very often you don't practice it. And if you don't practice it, you don't master it. So I think it's extremely important that we integrate plant-based culinary into culinary schools and hotel schools. Now, the misconception is that we think that, especially in Hong Kong, vegetarian food is all about like Buddhist Chinese food, which is a lot of mushrooms and a lot of tofu, which 10 years ago was definitely true. But it's through our restaurants and the handful of vegetarian vegan restaurants that started to open here in Hong Kong, that's where we really started to thrive, because not only were we cooking with as much as possible local seasonal, utilizing cultural different techniques from different cultures. So incorporating some Thai food, making it as authentic as possible, Italian or Indian, but making it as authentic as possible. But then understanding that we can actually just shift the meat away or convert. I call that plant-based conversion. So let's say I'm making a Thai green curry, and normally you use chicken. I'm replacing it with an ingredient that might be a bit more biodiverse. People don't know about it. So I'm using lion's mane mushroom, which actually, if you treat it well, it has the same texture as chicken. So then you open up people's mindsets, and they're not just then eating, oh, it's a vegetarian Thai curry. It's a Thai curry with lion's mane mushroom. And that's when people can start to connect. So that's one of those ways that we try to change people's perception about vegetarian food, that it is not just about plants and beans and that's it, but that we can make it as creative as possible. And also by integrating a lot of raw food techniques, which generally was used was only adapted with raw food cooks or people who were really health conscious. But now, as regular chefs, we can also adapt a lot of ancient techniques like fermentation and culturing foods, and a lot of raw food techniques as well to enhance the nutritional level of the dishes.
That's amazing. We heard last week from one of the chefs that was in the launch of the Double Pyramid, really the importance of fermented foods and how, that ancient tradition of fermenting foods can be good in so many ways. It's good in preserving food and preventing food waste, but it's also a way to, help our own health, to make our gut microbiomes more healthy. And so be more in line. So all of these things are really interesting. I want to shift gears a little bit and ask Chef Gill what the idea of slow food means to you, and how do you practice this philosophy in your cooking?
We have emphasis on the food from thousands of years or many, many years back. And because the research or the documentation, what Ayurveda did it was all, understanding that we are, born, the man is born from food, and food only nourishes us, and then we become the food of the other creations, and that's in our culture, and but then it was realized long time back, what we are now talking, that to turn people into more plant-based food and to cook more that food so that animals, to keep the balance between in the nature, because the emission, the carbon print and all those things. And I think so that in India this was realized many, many years back, thousands of years back, when the emphasis on the vegetarian food was given much more. And animal food, it was given much less. Even still, if we take our coastline, India is not a vegetarian country. It's a non-veg country. People eat more meats here and the fish. But emphasis or the focus on the vegetarian food, the plant-based food is equally same. Importance is given to that food also all the time. That's why we cook variety of vegetables. We have seasons. We grow so many vegetables, and even so that's the reason that because of the environmental, because it is believed that the food is only if it is in the harmony with nature. If it disturbs the nature, then it's not a food. You should slow it down, or you stop eating it, or find out some other alternative. Or food must keep the environment must be clean, because that environment is for you, and you are also the nature. You are not out of the nature, so it's for you. So that's the focus on vegetarian food is a lot. That's why we have many varieties, many kinds, many oils, like our different regions, north, east, south. Because of the local availability of the oil, we have different oil. Like in the north, we use the dairy fat and the mustard oil. In the south, they use the sesame oil, or the coconut oil and the coconut oil. In the west, they use groundnut oil. And, the east, they use again the mustard oil. So, everywhere there's a different oil, and it's the diversity is so good. There's never a shortage of oils and all those things, because it's not one oil which is used everywhere.
Absolutely.
So, and we believe in the diversity because we believe that, and I strongly believe it, that the food security or the nourished food for all is only possible through the diversity.
Absolutely.
There's enough food.
For sure. And you both mentioned this in your comments, the importance of agriculture.
I work on this. I work on the diversity. I work a lot in that, with the different people, with the students, colleges, wherever I lecture, my emphasis more on the diversity. And that only gave variety of food to the different people, in your menus also. How you bring variety in the menu. And in India, we believe the diversity. We have like 6 days. We have 6 seasons. As for the agriculture is concerned, or as the climate and the agriculture is concerned, there's 6 seasons. It means that every 2 months there is some different vegetable and the fruit is there. And nowadays, because of the technology and all that, things are available around the year or some before, late, whatever. But those 2 months, still we practice that in India. Those 2 months, a particular few vegetables or the fruits, they are best in their nature. They are best, well ripened, best flavors, the best color, the best texture. They taste so
Sure.
good, so easy to cook. You know, so
Absolutely.
the focus is a lot of the vegetarian and the vegetable food. So now, when we have to work on plant-based food and all that, it's very easy. It's not new to us. It's easy.
Absolutely. Let me
Easy
bring
to.
Chef Chan back into this conversation. So Peggy, I mean, you mentioned diversity as part of, how you create meals and how you educate other chefs and eaters. And I'm wondering if you can touch on this idea of agrobiodiversity and why it's so important to the work that you do.
Yeah.
Chef Gill, could you go on mute for a second, please? The feedback's a little rough. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, just to touch on Chef Gill's point about how we should be eating with the seasons, and essentially that's what slow food is. It's listening to the season, and it's slowing down to ensure that we as chefs are well prepared for what's to come next season. When we're writing our menus, that we're prepared, that we work with the farmers to see what's in harvest, to see what's the most right. And that's when you can actually create a menu that is of the utmost quality. But like a place in, like a city in Hong Kong or any kind of first world financial cities where over 95% of our food is imported, that's really difficult to do, So again, moving back to that systemic issue of how do we slow down when cities like ours are already relying on this efficiency to become more efficient, and is efficiency what we should be achieving in order to create a more regenerative world down the line, or is the system already not applicable anymore? No longer can we talk about sustainability because we're so far away from sustainability now. How can we talk about things that, for us as chefs, we can not just create delicious food for our customers and educate during that time, but also to support our farmers in their work? How can we magnify their voices through our platforms? As you know, celebrity chefs are everything in Hong Kong, where we place a lot of emphasis on the tourism industry and restaurants doing well here. We should be really leveraging on that voice to help amplify on the work of our farmers. And how can we shift also capitalism for good? So how can we put money into where our mouth is? How can we turn that money back into growing better food for human consumption, not just for animal consumption, for human consumption, as well as to regenerate our soil so that our future generations have a more habitable planet to live on. So I think that we as chefs no longer can just be about cooking delicious food. Right. I think that should just be like basic, but we need to be thinking a lot deeper because now we know that over 1/3 of our world's greenhouse gas is derived from the food sector. So we have a huge responsibility.
Absolutely. You're right. Of course, food should be delicious, but it should also provide all of these other things that you both have been talking about. And I'm wondering, Chef Chan, you mentioned this idea of efficiency. And when you have a city or a country that's importing the majority of its food, that's not efficient, right? COVID-19 has shown us, how fragile our food systems are, our food and agriculture systems are. And so we really do need to emphasize that, working with local farmers, focusing on seasonality and diversity, these are all things that are integral to making sure that the food system is healthy, delicious, and sustainable for all. There was a great comment from Jitendra Sharma, and they would like to know how culture can help to minimize food waste. And so I'm wondering if you both can comment on that. Chef Gill, would you like to go first?
Yeah. Definitely, there is no doubt, and I believe that also there is no culture in the whole world, when at least about 80, 90 years back, if they were not working on to save water and to save food wastage and all that, because wastage is never considered as the right thing. So only with technology, things are available plenty, so the wastage started. So because this I'm saying, culturally I have seen, traditionally I have seen, there are so many dishes which clearly show there is no wastage. Like I'm surprised now, even in India also, that you get the radish without leaves. You should put, even for the therapeutic value also, is much better if you cook the whole radish and with all the leaves in it. The volume of the dish become double. You need only half the vegetable because the bowl, and there is no wastage. Same way the cauliflower leaves are thrown out. Right. The radish leaves doesn't come in the market. But I've seen when all these things are available with the leaf. And now when I buy straight from the farm, I buy everything with a leaf. That's food. That's so, and it is very high nutritional value also. Like in the cauliflower leaves, they're very nice. The large one, you can wrap the fish in it and cook it. Like in India, mostly we do the banana leaf, but there are so many leaves available. You can make the bundles with the leaves with the weight. The chef can be very, very creative if there is. Absolutely. But we must see these things. And then, even like the overnight vegetables or overnight dals, there is a small portion. Now what we do is, culturally, this is that we make the dough of the wheat flour with whatever the dal or vegetable put in that. And because it's not enough that we can do a filling of the bread and all that. It's little. But it's cooked in that and makes a nice, in the morning, the rice pratas. The pratas are now, or the bread is nice, savory, has a taste of flour, vegetables, and little spices. It tastes so good.
Yeah, that's great.
So there are so many.
Sure.
There's so many things culturally which we use, and there is no wastage.
That's a great point that, using food that would otherwise be wasted, it can be delicious. Chef Chan, do you want to comment on how to minimize food waste? I mean, so many celebrity chefs and other chefs have been big crusaders in the fight against food waste.
Yes, and according to Project Drawdown, it's one of the top 3 ways to reverse greenhouse gas emissions or reverse climate change. So definitely it is integral. Food waste as an issue, as a climate issue, it is integrated into how fragile our food system actually is, and how actually inefficient our food system is. Much of the food waste is actually derived at the farm, right? So there's a lot of the food loss that is apparent, and that's simply because of consumer demands and what retailers demand for perfect, round, beautiful fruits and vegetables that looks exactly the same every single time. Now we need to shift that mindset in order to fix this issue of food loss and waste. We're actually producing much more than we actually need. So that kind of inefficiency of getting food, properly good, delicious food, into the hands of people, into the mouths of people, is a massive inefficiency that we're seeing. Now, as a chef at the restaurant, for me, why would I want to buy more at a higher bulk if I can't use it to its peak quality? So that's a thing. It's like supply and demand and economies of scale. Suppliers will often tell us buy more and I'll give you a cheaper price. But the thing is, like, is it an ingredient that I can actually keep for that long? And if I can't keep for that long, I'm gonna have to chuck it out or do something with it. And I always tell my staff is that anything, any kind of food, any kind of inventory that is stored on the shelves is cash. And cash is money that we need as restaurateurs to operate. So why would we, be so inefficient in our decision making that we're creating this massive pantry and stocking up so much food? But rather, why can't we just teach our staff to actually learn to measure better, learn to estimate what we need better, create a menu that is not too large so that we have a bit more control over what we're using, maybe even write menus that are a bit more flexible so that when you're talking about, Chinese greens, so kale, Chinese kale, we're not just using kale and because we can use the word seasonal greens instead of a specific green, so that customers don't have a expectation of what you would say. So giving that kind of flexibility is extremely important. And then finally, getting your staff to start to measure their waste as well, and food portioning. So as much as most people want value, a bigger portion would be of value, but can you actually eat that much? And is the nutritional value actually that great, or are you just consuming empty carbs at the end of the day? So I think portioning and also measuring what you're wasting would be very helpful in order to reduce your waste.
Such a great point about portion sizes. And I think in many cultures, portion sizes were not as big as they are now. We have this, sort of Western ideal of, big plates with massive amounts of food. And that has not proved to be very good for either food waste or for our waste lines in terms of overweight and obesity. I'm wondering, Chef Gill, you've worked in a lot of luxury establishments, fine dining in the past. What do you think are some of the greatest challenges to building a more sustainable fine dining industry?
Tell me again what you said.
So you started your career in hotel luxury dining. How can we make our fine dining experiences more, honoring, farmers and culturally appropriate diets, and also making them more healthy and sustainable?
No, you see, the fine dining food, the menu is, the cooking depends on the concept of the restaurant and the chefs, what he like to cook, what he like to make the things. And, you plan the menu in such a way that, which is, you get the daily supplies of the season and then you cook the dishes. And the cooked dishes should be, not that complicated also. It should be simpler, but well presented, and it must, give the satisfy the palate of the diner, and give the nutrition, and must, stimulate the faculties of the, of the diner, and that's why it should be good. So one must take care. This is what the training is given to the people to do it. And in the food and beverage, in our business, it's very, very important to communicate to the diner, talk to the diner. That what is your food? What are the philosophy behind your food is? How you're making the food which is for the goodness to you. What all? Like I say, like in our food now, it is very, very important, that the chef has to be, work on ethics. It has to be honesty. It has to be, good practices for the food. Transparency of the food, of the ingredient must be there. There not be anything mystic on the menu, or like we also used to enjoy that in the chef style. If style is yours, but must communicate it to the guest diner. He must understand what the person is eating. So if you do all these things, then your resourcing, your storages, your, pre-preparations, everything has to be as committed.
Absolutely.
So commitment is a very big thing. This is the way you train your people also. You put your system correct this way.
Sure. And I love that you mentioned ethics and honesty. This relates back to what Chef Chan said earlier about transparency and traceability. And with your company, Grassroots Initiatives Consultancy, you are training restaurant professionals to become more sustainable, to honor these things. Can you talk a little bit
You
about
see,
that?
I tell you.
Sorry,
Oh,
Chef Gill, can you go on mute for a second, please? That I can't hear Chef Can.
no, you can hear me now? You can
Yes.
hear?
I was just asking
Yeah.
Chef Can a question about her company, Grassroots.
Okay, yeah, please.
Thank you.
Yeah, please, Peggy, go ahead.
You're on mute, Peggy.
All right. So with Grassroots, yes, the whole idea was that after we had done our LCA, our life cycle analysis with the restaurant back in 2018, it revealed to us a huge measurement point that we never recognized, was that all of our operations, our restaurant operations, emits some kind of emission. And very recently, actually in Hong Kong, it's calculated that the hotel and restaurant industry's ecological footprint is 8% of the entire city's greenhouse gas emissions. So it's huge. It takes up a lot of our energies. And so when we're talking about restaurants and our operations and what it actually emits in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, it depends also on whether you're serving meat on your menu or not. So that is a huge way to actually help you lower your emission factors. So after we did our life cycle analysis, we created the sustainability report, which was then picked up by the UN SDG SCAP. And from there, we recognized that if we can just get more of our colleagues and our peers in the industry to start to measure their emission factors, so whether it's their scope 3, which is their entire supply chain, which is a difficult task, but then now there are more and more people doing that, more and more research scientists doing that. If we can get them to start to measure the food waste and to segregate the waste and to divert their food waste as well, if we can get them to see their consumption patterns in terms of gas, electricity, and water usage, those are, at the end of the day, the emission factor will equate to a carbon emission factor per diner. So I think the goal of the chef at the end of the day would then be, or the goal of a restaurant at the end of the day, is to become as carbon neutral as possible so that they can somehow offset their emissions. And that's kind of where we fixated our goal towards with Grassroots initiatives, and now our NGO that we're picking up called Zero Footprint. It started in California, but we're bringing it into Asia, is to help restaurants to recognize that their practices do have a huge effect, whether positively or negatively, directly related to our environment. And so certain practices that we suggest them to tweak, like I said earlier, just diverting their food waste and segregating the waste will do a lot to help lower their carbon emissions. Eventually, I think that restaurants will, like a lot of the big corporate businesses, will have to reveal some kind of carbon accountancy or some kind of sustainability measures in order for them to become accountable. And I think that, I don't know which country is going to start that first, but I think it will eventually come here. And we can't no longer just talk about profit and loss spreadsheets and how much money we can make and how many restaurants our empire has. We have to incorporate carbon accountancy into our operations as well.
That's such a great segue, Peggy. Thank you so much for showing the East and South Asia double pyramids that really focus on climate and health. And if we could bring those up for a moment, that would be great. So we can ask the chefs a little bit about them. Great. So you can see from this double pyramid, the inverted pyramid shows really the climate impact. And as Peggy mentioned, foods that have a higher impact are usually meat or processed meat-based foods. And it's not that, we're advocating that everyone should stop eating meat or go completely vegan. It just indicates that, if you're concerned about your climate impact, that you might want to eat less of these foods and more, grains and legumes and other, sort of whole foods. And again, these are also foods that are good for your health. They're not just good for the planet, they're good for people too. And I'm wondering, Chef Chan, if you want to comment on the impact of what a pyramid like this can do for the restaurant industry.
Absolutely. I think it's a great first step, and it's easy to understand in terms of the interrelations between what we're sourcing and the emission factors that it creates and it generates. There are more and more software technologies nowadays that can help you calculate your emission factors based on your dishes. So you enter your recipe and then they can actually get us close to an emission factor for you. So I'm actually currently publishing my first cookbook. And one of the special areas of the cookbook is that we will compare the emission factors of the traditional dish. So like, let's say lamb stew, a Chinese lamb stew, compared to the emission factors of I removed the lamb and then just use different types of tofu or mushrooms or whatever to replace that, but it tastes exactly the same. The experience will be exactly the same. The emission the lamb stew, the traditional lamb stew, is 9 times the amount of carbon emission equated to compared to the vegetarian option or the vegan option. And also like a chicken tikka, it's 5 times the amount of a plant-based option. So like having those comparisons actually shows consumers and diners and retail, consumers, there's one more way for them to choose what the better choice is for the health of our planet and ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so useful. I can't wait for your cookbook. Chef Gill, we can bring up the pyramids again. Do you have any comments on how they can be helpful for eaters and chefs alike?
No, definitely. This the double pyramid is definitely a great guideline, and it will be definitely helpful for the people. Because we all say, the local and the seasonal. So with the climate impact will definitely, if we do the season, that's what I said, that we are also part of the nature. So we have to nourish ourselves also according to the climate. So it's a very interesting study and a very nice, this presentation to make the climate impact also on the health and the food.
You're on mute. You're on mute.
My apologies that I'm on mute. I wanted to let people know that they could find the double pyramid at barillacfn.com. Again, that's barillacfn.com. I really appreciate both of your points on the double pyramid and where, it can really be a tool and a resource for eaters and chefs alike. I'm wondering, as we sort of finalize our conversation, what advice do you have for consumers as, we come out of the pandemic and we are, people have been finding ways to eat at home and cook more in lots of ways. And how can we keep some of the traditions and the conviviality that we've created at home present and make it continue past the pandemic and realize, I think people have, realized how precious food is in a lot of ways. They've realized that their regional and local food systems are really important. How can we not forget what we've learned during the pandemic? Chef Gill, why don't you go first?
Yeah. During the pandemic, everything has gone slow. The people have now learned what slow means actually and what is the importance of being slow. But there's enough time also. So I will tell people, and that's what we are also practicing at home, that everything to be cooked from scratch. So must enjoy cooking. cook from the scratch, buy the fresh vegetables and the fresh thing. And because when you cook from the scratch, you have a control on everything. You know how much fat to use, how much salt or sugar or what all things. You have a control in your hand. In the processed food, you have no control. It's already done. You have to accept it what you eat. But you cook from the scratch, you'll be able to make the things because the cooking, a lot of happen when you cook. The cooking is done through the mind. That mind keep guiding you the recipe. So that's why a good recipe, good cooking creates a very nice recipe for future. A new recipe will be created when you do that. And because you are doing it with a lot of happiness, and definitely you and your loved ones for whom you are cooking, is everybody will going to enjoy that food. And one thing I will like to emphasize here, that in the Ayurvedic practice, the stomach you fill up only with half with the food, half 1/4 with the liquid along with the food, 1/4 is empty. If you practice that, I'm trying to communicate this only that we will achieve two things. One is stomach will be able to handle the food much easier. It's like in a blender you fill it till the top, everything will spill. It will not be able to blend well. That's the Ayurvedic guideline. And you save 1/4 food. You save it. So it can be passed on to someone else. So in pandemic at least, it is very good for the health also. If the digestion is better, metabolism will be better, nutrients will go better into your tissues. It has all positive effect.
That's great. Thank you so much.
So in pandemic, enjoy cooking, cook from scratch, enjoy eating, keep 1/4 stomach, 1/4 hunger, don't fill it up.
That's great. And I love that you mentioned happiness and really enjoying food. Chef Gill, if you could go on mute again, the feedback is a little hard for me. But yeah, the happiness and the enjoyment and that conviviality that I think is so important. Chef Chan, do you want to comment on what we can learn and keep, what we've learned during the pandemic and what we can keep moving forward?
Yeah, everything that Chef Gill said, definitely. I practice that as well, not to fill up myself up too full anytime. But for sure, everything starts with the pantry. So give your pantry a makeover. Make sure that the oils you use and the salts and sugars you use are of high quality, are ethically sourced, you're paying fairly for the farmers, and also that maybe also support your local CSA kind of farm box. So it might not be easy to get local vegetables wherever you are, depending on where you are, like in Hong Kong. But if you sign on and subscribe to a weekly box, then it will give you some form of a habit or ritual in a way so that you don't forget. And you'll always look forward to that box of fresh veggies from the farmers. Just work directly with the farmers and try to support the work as much as possible. I think this is the time to really start to regenerate our Earth's soils through the help of our stewards at the farms. Yeah.
That's wonderful advice. Ethically sourced, fair pay, support local subscription boxes, create better habits. These are all things that a lot of folks have learned during the pandemic that I hope they'll carry forward. And at the end of it, you're having really delicious food that is based on the cultures of where you live and the farmers who grew it. I want to thank you both so much for joining us today. It's been an honor to see you both. Thank you to everyone who's been watching and who is listening. A reminder that this episode will also appear on our podcast, Food Talk with Dani Nierenberg. And I hope you'll continue to use the hashtag Double Pyramid to continue this conversation. And I hope everyone will join us at 9 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow when we'll be talking to chefs from the USA and Latin America. Thank you again, Chef Gill and Chef Chan. Stay safe.